Hi, welcome to Hotline 21. I'm Jenny Sevchuk. I work with CAWC, and I am joined today by Megan Rosado, who is the volunteer coordinator for CAWC. I would like to remind everybody that this is a live show, and you can call in with any questions or comments throughout the show. The number is at the bottom of your screen, right there. And I would also like to remind everybody that our program, CAWC, does have a 24-hour domestic violence hotline, and this is the number here. And then we also have our website down at the bottom if you're interested. So to start with, Megan, welcome.
Hi, thanks.
Would you like to share a little bit about your position with CAWC and why you became interested in working with the organization?
Sure. So, Connections for Abused Women and Their Children, CAWC, we're a domestic violence service organization. My role is I'm the direct service volunteer and education coordinator. So what that means is that I recruit, train, supervise the direct service volunteers, the folks that work with the staff as a team to provide services to the survivors and their children that come through our programs. And then a part of my job is also running the 40-hour domestic violence training. That's something that's a requirement for anyone who's going to work with survivors of domestic violence at a domestic violence program. So we provide that training to new volunteers, as well as our new staff members and others. And that's a large portion of my job is running that training. We do it a couple times a year. And then I also coordinate the public education outreach activities, things like this show here with CAN TV. When we get requests to do information tables at different health fairs, or to go and provide a presentation either to a particular client group at another type of a social service agency, or to other professionals that are wanting to learn more about domestic violence and our services. So that's the first part of your question, right?
Yes.
How did I first become involved with CAWC? Well, it'll have been almost 20 years in July.
Congratulations.
Thank you, but I don't like talking about how old that makes me. But almost 20 years ago, I was looking for a job. I had some previous experience working with homeless youth and homeless adults, so I figured that I probably wanted to work with that population. I think actually my whole life I've always been involved in different social justice movements. My parents taught me a lot and involved me in a lot of different things. I like to tell people I was involved in the women's movement since about the age of 2, so I don't think it's too surprising. But specifically, CAWC is a great organization with a long history. And I knew I wanted to work with youth. I knew possibly people who were homeless or close to homeless, and then being a woman as well, it felt like I'm in an appropriate place for me to work. Met the shelter director, who is amazing, and had some connections there. So it just felt like the right place, and then I've stayed.
Well, we're glad to have you still here.
Thanks.
So you mentioned the shelter director. One of our resources is a 24-hour hotline that is run through our shelter. And that hotline is a resource for anyone who does have any questions about domestic violence, or who is a survivor and in need of help themselves, or who knows somebody who might need help. And that hotline is run 24/7. There's always someone to answer that call. This is also where we will do shelter intakes if we have availability at our shelter program. And we also provide phone counseling at that shelter. And again, that number is right here. And then you can also go to our website if you want more information about it. But besides the hotline, what other resources does CAWC offer for victims of domestic violence?
We're pretty comprehensive in our services. We have the hotline, which is answered at the shelter. The shelter is our largest program. But we also have some other program sites. We have an outreach and walk-in program in the Humboldt Park. It's called the Humboldt Park Outreach Program. So it's in the Humboldt Park community. It doesn't serve specifically just the Humboldt Park community. Actually, our participants come from all over the city, sometimes even from the suburbs. Unfortunately, there aren't enough domestic violence services for the need that's out there. So, so we do see people coming from all over to access our services. And then we also have a couple of hospital-based programs at Stroger Hospital of Cook County, and then also with Northwestern Memorial Hospital. And then we also have collaboration, which is pretty unique, with Haymarket Center, which is a substance abuse treatment program. So the services look a little bit different depending on the program, but basically, you know, that 24-hour response is key. Crisis intervention, you know, that can be over through the hotline or by walking into our program when it's open in the Humboldt Park area, or responding to patients at the hospital that come in through the medical setting. In addition to that, basic just domestic violence information, what it is, talking to somebody, active listening, I think, is one of the key services that a lot of times people don't necessarily really understand, that's so much of our time is just spent really listening before trying to come up with any sort of solutions or, you know, interject with a survivor. Safety planning is very, very key, right? So, you know, a lot of times people misunderstand and think that the purpose of our services is to help victims leave. Yes, that is to help victims leave if that's what they want to do and if that's what's going to increase their safety. But that's not, you know, really the key thing is increasing safety. And so for some survivors, leaving the relationship might actually put them in a more dangerous situation. So we understand that, and we're really very options-based. So individual and group counseling that we have available, services for kids, both at the shelter program and then also at the Humboldt Park Outreach Program. Legal advocacy, we assist with providing both information about survivors' rights under the law, options that they may or may not want to take, kind of help them through, see if that's part of a safety plan that they want to enact. And then if they do decide to take that route, to provide some assistance and support as they navigate through the criminal justice system or the civil system, actually. And then basic, you know, at the shelter in particular, there's a lot of basic case management and other kinds of resource advocacy, you know, beyond just domestic violence services, based on the fact that while someone is in a shelter, even a domestic violence shelter, they're homeless. And so there's, you know, a lot of other different areas and different kind of planning that they're trying to address, you know, above and beyond what they've been experiencing as far as their victimization.
Right, that was a very comprehensive overview.
I can talk about it forever.
Yeah. I really like how you talked about the fact that we do take the survivor's story and the survivor's wishes into account, because I feel like a lot of people don't realize that leaving the relationship isn't always the immediate right answer. A lot of times when people talk about domestic violence, it seems like the first response is, well, get out. Why are you still there? And it really is a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it could be more life-threatening for that person to leave than to stay in the relationship. So if anyone's watching and finds themselves in a situation where they feel like they have to help somebody who is in an abusive situation, or if you're considering leaving, I would, you know, think about that, especially if you're trying to help them. Think about what this person is telling you about their situation, because they do know it better than you. They do know what will happen. They know, you know, how this person will react if they try to do something. So trying to force them to make a decision like that can actually be more detrimental than letting them make it on their own. And if you are questioning what you should do, again, call our hotline and we will help you with that.
And it's so hard to do, you know, because if someone does disclose to you, you don't want them to be in a situation where they're being hurt. And so there's this instant, desire to want to jump in and try and make it better. And so, you just have to be very, very patient and understand that, even going back to the listening thing, you'll probably get more information by just remaining quiet and really giving someone that space and recognizing that this may be the first time they've ever talked about it. And oftentimes, because if they've tried, again, helpers feel compelled to try and fix, right? And so we jump in too fast. And then we shut down, the talking and the communication.
Right.
Sometimes then it can put the person where they feel like they need to defend their partner because we don't understand, right? And if we just listen, then they could talk about the things that, are difficult for them in the relationship.
Exactly. Speaking of, experiences working with survivors of domestic violence, do you have any experience that you can think of working with your organization that has really impacted you?
So, every situation impacts me. I'm touched by every woman and child that I've ended up coming in contact with, every survivor that I've come in contact with. I'm amazed at the strength and the resiliency that we see, the ability to manage so many different things. It's very difficult, especially for folks that are, choosing to go to a shelter, but for anyone to come and ask for help. And so it really humbles me, and it just is opportunities for a lot of perspective. But some of the experiences that I've had that impact me the most are seeing people who benefited from our services coming back later on. And in particular, I've had the opportunity, I walked into a store one day, and this young man behind the counter asked me if I used to work at the shelter on blah, blah, blah street. The location's confidential. And so I looked at this young man and I was like, do I know you? I'm not going to necessarily answer that question right away. Like what? And then it turned out that this young man, about 10 years prior, had been a child at the shelter. And so that was huge. And I really, again, it was an insight to the impact that we can have, that this young man, recognized me and wanted to actually go ahead and identify himself to me as he's at work, one day.
In his normal life.
That was pretty amazing. And then I've also had the opportunity as the volunteer coordinator to have former clients, adults, and even more so children who had been at the shelter. Luckily, that's one of the benefits of being there for 20 years. I do have that opportunity to see some people 10 years later, coming back, and that's pretty amazing and really speaks to the impact of what we can do even in a short period of time in someone's life.
That's really beautiful.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, he was just like, I know you.
Yeah,
that really does say volumes about the work that this organization does. You also talked a little bit about the domestic violence training course. How does this work? Do you sign up for it online? Do you have to call in? Does it have to be in a professional capacity? You have to be sent by your job to come to the training?
Well, some people have to because it's a requirement if they're working, such as us. And so anyone who wants to volunteer to work directly with survivors, and the 40-hour training is connected to our confidentiality laws for one thing, but it is a great comprehensive, introduction. And so I tell people it's a comprehensive overview of, different issues in domestic violence, and it goes over a series of several weeks. We run it, sometimes on Saturdays, and then sometimes a combination of evenings during the week with a couple of Saturday sessions, so that our program volunteers can attend. But we do provide the training to other allied professionals, so people who are either working at another domestic violence agency or other social service providers. We've had social workers, I've had people, clergy personnel come and take the training, teachers, substance abuse counselors. So anyone can contact me. You can go to our website and get our contact information and then call me at our administrative office. I'll be happy to explain about the training. For folks that want to volunteer, they have to apply to become a program volunteer, and then once they're accepted, then they get scheduled to go through whatever the upcoming training is. For folks that are just wanting the training, other professionals, they just simply call me, and then I take their names for a list to be notified as we have space available and the dates confirmed for whatever the upcoming session is.
And yeah, it is 40 hours of training. It's a very comprehensive overview. You mentioned that you've had people from like all disciplines come and take this training. How do you think someone who's a teacher or a clergy member could benefit from domestic violence training? Like, why would they want to take this course?
It's not something that is talked about a lot of times, and domestic violence affects so many people. And so I think a lot of times, they're professionals, but a lot of times people that end up in the training say, this is actually going to help me more with my family members, with my neighbor, just to understand and have more empathy, and then to know more about the resources, and, possibly be able to plant a seed with somebody, just to feel a little bit more confident when faced with something, so that they don't just do what we were saying before, jumping in and trying to fix it rather than coming from a place of really understanding and supporting somebody. So, but teachers, it may be a parent of one of their students, or it might help them to give them some insight. It's hard sometimes, especially with children. Something that has been diagnosed as ADHD might actually be trauma symptoms, and so being able to point out other things and point people in the right direction and give them support. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was really good. Yeah, it is important to remember that domestic violence permeates every part of our society, and even if you are not a social worker who works with domestic violence, you might still come in contact with it. 1
in 4 women and 1 in 7 men. So that's a lot of people if you really think about the people. And the reality is that it's obviously people keep it quiet. Then you never know someone's story.
That's so true.
Until they tell you.
Yeah. So people who do take this course, a lot of them do become volunteers with CAWC. How does the volunteer program work in general?
So volunteers play a crucial role in supporting our direct service staff and the families. They help with creating a welcoming environment. We utilize direct service volunteers at the shelter program and then also at the Humboldt Park Outreach Program. One of our biggest needs for support is working with the kids. So they're the majority of our clients. If you consider that each mom's coming with maybe more than one child. So it's not a place for anyone who doesn't like to be around kids, but in particular, they're going through a lot, and so they're very, there are a lot of needs, and in particular, I find that volunteers, when they're first getting involved, they're still getting familiar with our policies and procedures and paperwork. Working with the kids is one of the areas where they usually feel like they make a more significant contribution, right away. They can connect. The children that we work with have been through a lot, and so they do have different aggressive behaviors, or they may have issues with trust and social skills and things like that. But at the same time, I still find children a lot of times are more open than adults.
I agree with that.
So there's often an in with the kids, and the kids are so beneficial to work with the kids. You really get a lot because they're at such an early developmental stage,
Yeah.
and so they change so fast.
They do.
You know, in a short period of time, where again, you know, some of the adults that we work with, those changes are happening, but we're not
Yeah.
seeing it necessarily. But you'll see someone come back a year later, and you know, all of a sudden, you can really see the impact of you
their
know,
life is completely different.
yeah, and you know, and seeing them being able to move forward. But kids, you'll see, you know, a child that comes into the shelter at the beginning and is being put on timeout a lot.
Yeah.
By the end of their stay, they're, you know, communicating about their feelings and telling other kids that they need time out and
Yep.
you know, stuff like that. So that's great. In addition to that, everything that we've got to do to keep the shelter running and functioning smoothly. If the women are in the kitchen cooking and they need some mass storage, we've got to go get that for them. They need to take their medications, keep those locked up for safety reasons. We need to get those down for them. There's a conflict among the residents. We need to mediate the conflict. Fire alarm goes off. Got to do the
Yes.
evacuation procedures for the house. So volunteers do assist with responding to calls on the hotline as well as the business line, but it's really not the main focus by any means.
Yeah.
The main focus is more responding to the needs of the women and children actually living in the house. And at the Humboldt Park Outreach Program, again, volunteers coming in while we have support groups, so a lot of times it's working with the kids during that time, doing like group activities. The shelter, we do group activities,
Yeah.
but then in addition to that, it's their home. So
Yeah.
one-on-one support, helping them with their homework, you know, stuff
Yeah.
like that. And then in addition to that, we also have non-direct service volunteering. So that doesn't require the training. We have a junior board for the agency. There's information about that on our website. So that's a group of young professionals that help out with promoting the agency, you know, attracting donors and resources and getting our name out in the community. They do different events throughout the year to let people know about the agency and the services and to get people involved in the issue of domestic violence. We have folks that do things like donation drive for items off of our wish list, and so you can call our office and, you know, coordinate that, or adopting families for gifts at the holidays, you know, different things.
Yeah. That's good. You know, you can see that you don't have to be like a full-time committed direct service volunteer. You know, you don't have to commit to that time every week if you still want to help the organization. There are other options out there, and that's really good. So I want to remind everybody again of the hotline number right here and our website. Again, you can call this for any information whenever you need it. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We do speak multiple languages, so if you don't speak English necessarily, we can still help you. And again, if you do have any questions, it's a live show. You're welcome to call in with any questions or comments. But just to wrap up a little bit, I just want to remind everybody that if you do know somebody who needs help, or if you yourself are looking for information or a way out of your situation, or even just a way to make your situation better, really, you know, call our hotline number. There are other agencies in Chicago as well. If you're not in Chicago, there are agencies all throughout the country. There's a National Domestic Violence Hotline as well. You can call anytime and ask for information. If you don't want to call necessarily, talk to someone and see if they know something. The best way to get help and services is to let someone know that there is a problem to start with. And if you're questioning if there is a problem even, again, ask somebody, because if you are worried about your life or someone else's life that you care about, you should probably talk to somebody. So, again, Megan, thank you so much for being here.
That was fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. And we'll see you again next month. Thank you for tuning in.
Thanks.